Just before dawn on January 3rd, 2026, a sovereign nation lost its president without firing a single warning shot. Nicolás Maduro did not address the country. He did not flee into exile. He did not negotiate terms. Instead, U.S. forces entered Caracas under the cover of darkness.
I see boats coming in like loaded up the other day with all sorts of drugs, and we're going to take them out.
Extracted Maduro and his wife from a secured compound and removed them from Venezuelan soil. By the time the world woke up, the man who had ruled Venezuela for more than a decade was already airborne. 48 hours later, he stood inside a federal courtroom in New York. The transfer of power did not come through ballots or bullets. It came through handcuffs. Maduro's rise had never been accidental. He was not a charismatic revolutionary or a political outsider who seized control through force. He was a loyal operator who learned how power actually works inside broken systems. As a union organizer and later a close ally of Hugo Chavez, Maduro watched Venezuela transform from a republic into a personalized state. Chavez dismantled checks and balances, centralized authority, and rewired institutions to serve loyalty instead of law. When Chavez died in 2013, Maduro did not inherit chaos. He inherited a machine, and he knew how to run it. Once in office, Maduro focused less on popularity and more on permanence. Elections continued, but their outcomes became predictable. Courts lost independence. Opposition leaders were prosecuted or sidelined. Media outlets were silenced or absorbed. The military was rewarded and embedded into every layer of governance. Venezuela still had ministries, legislatures, and judges. But the system no longer existed to restrain power. It existed to protect it. What Maduro controlled was not just a country, but the absence of accountability. That control was funded by oil. Venezuela possessed some of the largest proven oil reserves in the world, and for years, that wealth masked structural decay. Under Maduro, oil money became the glue holding the regime together, financing patronage, military loyalty, and political survival even as production collapsed and corruption surged. As the economy imploded, inflation erased livelihoods and millions fled the country. But the state endured. To outsiders, it looked like mismanagement. To prosecutors, it looked like insulation. According to U.S. indictments, the Venezuelan government did not merely fail to stop criminal activity, it absorbed it. Prosecutors alleged that state institutions were repurposed to facilitate international drug trafficking, with senior officials providing protection, logistics, and diplomatic cover. Cocaine shipments allegedly moved through Venezuelan territory with official support. Diplomatic passports were allegedly issued to traffickers. State-controlled air routes and ports allegedly became tools for laundering proceeds. What emerged was not a rogue operation, but a system, one designed to profit from chaos while shielding those at the top. At the center of the case was a charge rarely applied to a sitting head of state: narco-terrorism. U.S. authorities alleged that Maduro and his inner circle partnered with armed groups, cartels designated as terrorist organizations, including transnational gangs and insurgent forces. These alliances, prosecutors claim, were strategic, providing revenue, enforcement, and leverage. The indictment extended beyond Maduro to his wife, his son, senior ministers, and criminal leaders operating across borders. It described a regime that used fear and corruption not to destabilize the state, but to preserve it. For years, these accusations existed in a gray zone between law and geopolitics. Maduro dismissed them as imperial interference, designed to justify foreign control of Venezuela's oil. International law experts debated whether a head of state could ever be prosecuted by a foreign court, and as long as Maduro retained effective control over the territory, those protections largely held. But while the public debate stalled, the case continued to grow quietly. U.S. officials later stated that evidence had been compiled over more than a decade, built through intelligence operations, financial tracking, informants, and classified sources. By late 2025, the standoff reached a breaking point. The United States declared Maduro's presidency illegitimate, following contested elections and dramatically increased financial rewards for his capture. Military assets expanded across the Caribbean. Covert authorities were broadened. What had once been a legal pressure campaign became a strategic calculation. In January 2026, that calculation turned into action. Operation Resolve removed Maduro from power in hours, bypassing diplomacy and redefining the line between arrest and invasion. Inside the courtroom, Maduro pleaded not guilty. His attorneys argued that he remained the legitimate president of Venezuela and that his capture violated international law. Maduro called himself a kidnapped leader and a prisoner of war. Legal scholars acknowledged the unprecedented nature of the case, particularly under the UN Charter and doctrines of head of state immunity. But under U.S. legal precedent, the manner of capture did not invalidate jurisdiction. Once on American soil, the trial could proceed. Power, for the first time, would be measured not by authority, but by evidence. Maduro's downfall did not resolve Venezuela's crisis, nor did it answer every legal and moral question raised by his capture, but it revealed something deeper about modern power. Systems can survive collapse as long as money flows and loyalty holds. Institutions can exist without accountability, and consequences can be delayed for years, until they arrive suddenly, decisively, and without warning. In a world built on money, power, and lies, downfall is rarely dramatic in the beginning. It is quiet, methodical, and inevitable. By the time Nicolás Maduro stood before a federal judge in New York, the story had shifted from military spectacle to financial anatomy. This was no longer about helicopters, special forces, or international shock. It was about money, where it moved, who protected it, and how an entire state apparatus allegedly transformed into a shield for illicit power. Prosecutors were not simply arguing that Maduro broke the law. They were arguing that the law itself had been repurposed to serve him. For years, Venezuela's collapse was framed as ideological failure, socialism gone wrong, corruption out of control, institutions weakened by incompetence. But the indictment told a different story. According to U.S. prosecutors, Venezuela did not fall apart accidentally. It was hollowed out deliberately. State agencies that once regulated borders, ports, and airspace were allegedly reassigned to protect trafficking routes. Security forces that once enforced the law were accused of selectively ignoring it. In this version of events, dysfunction wasn't a flaw, it was cover. At the center of that system, prosecutors said, was a financial pipeline that moved drugs north and money back south, disguised behind diplomacy, state travel, and military logistics. Passports allegedly issued to traffickers, flights shielded from inspection, containers waved through ports. Each step, prosecutors claim, required cooperation at the highest levels. This was not street crime. This was institutional access, the kind only power can buy. The most damaging allegations were not about ideology or politics, but about family. Maduro's wife, Cilia Flores, once one of the most powerful figures in Venezuela's legislature, was accused of facilitating safe passage for shipments and accepting bribes tied directly to trafficking operations. His son was accused of acting as a logistical intermediary, overseeing movements and coordinating shipments with the confidence of someone who believed he was untouchable. Prosecutors framed it as a dynasty, not a presidency, a concentration of power where loyalty was personal and profit was inherited. This is where the lie becomes central. Publicly, Maduro positioned himself as a revolutionary leader defending Venezuela from imperial aggression. Privately, prosecutors argue, the state was allegedly monetized, its borders, its resources, its security, all converted into leverage. The anti-imperialist rhetoric, they claim, was not a governing philosophy. It was a shield, one that reframed accusations as foreign attacks and insulated the regime from internal dissent. But lies that scale require enforcement. According to the indictment, intimidation was not incidental, it was structural. Prosecutors alleged kidnappings, threats, and violence used to settle debts, silence rivals, and enforce discipline within trafficking networks. Whether every allegation is ultimately proven in court remains to be seen. What matters for this story is the framework prosecutors laid out. Power maintained not through consent, but through fear, and financed not through governance, but through extraction. The collapse began the moment that framework lost its invisibility. Years of intelligence gathering, financial tracing, and international cooperation slowly narrowed the circle. Unlike coups or revolutions, this collapse did not rely on mass protests or military defection. It relied on documentation, on indictments filed quietly, on sealed evidence, on the assumption that time favors institutions more than individuals. When Maduro was removed, the illusion of permanence vanished instantly. Allies who once defended him shifted their language. Officials who owed their positions to his authority recalibrated. The military, long loyal to the office, suddenly faced a reality where the office no longer protected the man. Power, once centralized, fragmented overnight. International reaction revealed the deeper stakes. Critics warned that arresting a sitting head of state shattered norms of sovereignty. Supporters argued that sovereignty cannot function as immunity for large-scale criminal activity. The comparison to Manuel Noriega was unavoidable. Another leader who believed control at home guaranteed safety abroad until it didn't. The message was unmistakable. Borders no longer guarantee insulation from consequences. Inside Venezuela, the aftermath was uncertain and fragile. For citizens exhausted by inflation, shortages, and repression, Maduro's removal felt like an ending. But endings in power vacuums are rarely clean. Interim leadership promised stability, while signaling openness to foreign investment, particularly in oil. The same resources that once underwrote political survival now became bargaining chips for legitimacy. Money, once again, sat at the center of the transition. In court, the case will move slowly. Much of the evidence will remain classified. Jurisdictional challenges will be raised. Immunity will be debated. The verdict, years from now, will matter legally. But historically, the outcome is already fixed. Maduro's power did not end because an election removed him. It ended because the system that protected him collapsed under its own weight. This is the final lesson of money. Power lies. Power survives as long as its narrative holds. Lies endure as long as institutions repeat them. And money, when left unaccountable, reshapes everything it touches, including governments. Nicolás Maduro did not lose power because he was weak. He lost it because the illusion that he was untouchable finally ran out of buyers.